Hi, Aries Sun and Rising. Welcome to your July 2025 Astro Update. It's Rena here. So, July has a lot going on, including 3 retrogrades, and even more, I don't know, I think this is even more significant, is that Uranus is changing signs, and now Uranus is going to be in Gemini. So, you've had Uranus in your money sector for the past 7 years, and it will go back into Taurus later this year into 2026. And when it switches back into Gemini, it will be there for good. So if you had some kind of like curveballs or things happening very suddenly of a financial nature, and maybe it was in some cases unpleasant surprises, you may find that when Uranus leaves this sector, that things settle down and are a little bit more stable. However, maybe some of you struck it rich during this transit. And it was unpredictable, but in a more positive way. So on the 4th of the month, which is, 4th of July in the United States, Venus goes into Gemini. And so Venus goes into the 3rd house. And of course, this is where Uranus is about to enter. And so the 3rd house is Gemini's domain. And so it deals with everything involving teaching, learning, and communicating. It's also your mind, and I elaborate by saying it's the mundane mind, which means it's the mind that processes information and helps you to navigate the world, versus the higher mind, which is the 9th house and is more like the philosophical side of life. So this is the more practical information that you are obtaining. And so Venus into this area may give you a desire to seek pleasurable activities that involve the mind. So, for instance, and also maybe art combined. So going to the theater and watching a play, and not just enjoying the talent of the acting, but also the writer who wrote that play and the dialogue, and, really enjoying that. Venus can also be about money, so you could be profiting from some of your writings. And the 3rd house can be social media, by the way, so it could even be communicating through, making videos or whatnot, and also having a blog in some cases, that sort of thing. And the 3rd house is your local area and your neighbors, so it could be finding romance, love through somebody in the local area. Maybe it's like some kind of neighbor, something like that, who knows. On the same day, Neptune goes retrograde in your sign. So you've had Neptune in your sign for several months now, Aries, but at the very beginning degrees. Like this retrograde is at 3 degrees of Aries. So suffice it to say, Neptune hasn't gotten too far here. And this can be, kind of like something about yourself that maybe you have been a little bit deluded about, that you're forced to kind of acknowledge, pay attention to. Because when Neptune is in your 1st house, you may have unrealistic self-concept. I was going to say delusions of grandeur, but I know there are no Aries people out there that are like that, right? So, but anyway, so one thing, it's funny because, Aries rules the first house in astrology. So anytime an Aries person doesn't feel like they know who they are, like they have some kind of like identity crisis or something like that, it's going to hit them that much harder because typically Aries is a very confident sign, and Neptune here can make them not so much. But Neptune has a spiritual influence, so that can give a chance for humility and an ability to like tolerate not knowing, or at least practice the ability to not have that kind of cocksure sense of self. Remember that these are transits. We're not talking about your natal Neptune here. So it can be something that is actually very beneficial for such a person, even if it interferes with your sense of who you are, because maybe you're broadening that and you don't need to see yourself in such a confined sort of way. So now that Neptune is retrograding, any area where you might have not really paid attention to certain aspects of yourself, now that might be what gets your attention. On the 7th, Uranus goes into Gemini in your third house. Uranus is about technology, and it's also about being individualistic, and you could say nonconformist. So let's say you suddenly get the urge to be a YouTuber. Well, you may not read all of the tips on how to succeed and have a YouTube channel. You may just go with your gut instinct and do things that are completely out of the box, against, conventions take on it. And who knows, you could be wildly successful precisely because you're being that nonconformist. This could have unpredictable effects, but it might end up in your favor. The third house is one of those houses, like the 11th house that Uranus rules, by the way, that can be about your friends, the people that you associate with. And Uranus here can make you having associates who are a lot more unusual in one way or another. I think a big thing that can happen, because this is the house of your mind, it can make you a lot more intuitive and a lot more, and that's more kind of a spiritual thing, but even in the mundane mind, a lot more of a free thinker, and so that you don't necessarily believe everything that you're told. I was going to say like a crackpot, because Uranus can have some very strange beliefs. But I mean, I probably would agree wholeheartedly with whatever those things are. So I would be telling on myself, I guess. But yeah, so it can free your mind from conventional thinking. On the 10th, there's a full moon at 18 degrees of Capricorn, and this is in your 10th house of career, Aries. It can go various ways. It can mean a promotion. It can mean someone who's decided to call it quits, maybe retire, maybe go into a completely different profession. A full moon in the 10th house can bring recognition to someone where their talents are well received or seen by others. On the 13th, Saturn goes retrograde at 1 degree of your sign. So have you noticed, Aries, the influence of Saturn in your sign? Is it too early, since Saturn is only 1 degree of Aries? Aries people tend to be very spontaneous, but one side effect of that is the tendency to not follow through. So if an Aries person gets the whim to do something at a certain time, maybe it does pan out. But if other factors support, and if the person is very high strung and prone to walk away from things when it gets frustrating, then maybe that's how it plays out for certain people, but it could be something very positive too. If you have been feeling some kind of a pinch with Saturn in your sign, Aries, it's important to resist the urge to go hog wild, because with Saturn retrograde, it could be letting up on bearing down on people. But it could unleash certain Aries people who have been feeling pent up and restricted, and they may let down their guard or do something. Saturn can be discipline. If you have recently, the first house can be the body. If you've recently been working out and doing all this discipline, and you decide to, I don't know, let that go because you feel like, hey, I'm kind of bored with it, or, I'm in shape now that I reached my goal. You may find that, maybe it's like you lose that drive or what have you. And it doesn't mean that that's going to be true for everyone. But in any case, you may even be exploring other avenues to achieve your personal goals. Maybe you were doing something that was too strict, and now you have to kind of relent and ease up a little bit. On the 17th, Mercury goes retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo. And this is the 5th house for you. This is actually Leo's domain. And if you are dating, there's a possibility that there will be some sort of misunderstanding verbally between you and the person that you're dating. So even though I don't tend to give advice, I would just ask that people keep in mind what true harmony is in a relationship. And it's not getting somebody to agree with you 100%, or that you're agreeing with them 100% of the time. So there could be, if you're dating, there could be like some sort of misunderstanding. This can be also with your child. The 5th house can be, I think it's like the firstborn. And specifically, but it's children in general. But if you're an artist, the 5th house is creativity. So you may be rethinking the way you go about creating art, and maybe you come up with a better technique even. The sun enters Leo on the 22nd of the month in that house. And this is such a fun house. It's called the house of pleasure, the hobbies that you have, anything that you're doing on your downtime. And then on the 30th, then there's going to be a new moon 2 days later after the sun enters on the 22nd. Then we have a new moon at the 24th at 2 degrees of Leo. And then the new moon in Leo on the 24th is at 2 degrees of Leo in this sector. So definitely set a intention. If you're an artist and you're thinking about wanting to do this full time as a career, see what happens. It looks like you already do this. Well, one thing I just want to say about when I say it looks like you already do this, one thing is that Mars went retrograde in Leo last year and spent a lot of time hanging out in your first house. Mars is your ruler, Aries, so where Mars goes is important, especially important for Aries people. But now Mars is progressing and it's in Virgo all month for you. So that's an interesting one actually too, because the 6th house can be the house of work. The work that you do, but also health. So when Mars is there, there's a physicality there. So you might be exploring new health regimens that involve exercise routines and whatnot. That might be something that you are doing. And the reason I say this is that Saturn retrograde in the first house could be maybe somebody who is, kind of slacking off, not as driven as they were before with that area of life. And so set your intentions when the new moon is in Leo in the 5th house for anything. If you have any kind of talents, be it the fine arts, but maybe you're crafty, maybe there's something that you could start as your own business. That is the 6th house. I'm sorry, that's the 5th house, the business that you own. That you really have a lot of insights into, but that's not really what you are asking for. So maybe that's not what is relevant right now. So yeah, just keep in mind this Leo energy is really stacking up here. And when it's in the 5th house, this should be a month of fun for you. And then on the 30th, Venus goes into Cancer. So that's the house of home and family. Venus can be money. If you're buying property or selling property, it could be related to this transit. You could be beautifying your home. Maybe you're sprucing it up in some way to make it more visually appealing. That could be Venus in the 4th house. Something harmonizing that has to do with you or your parents. The 4th house can be the mother specifically. Some people say the father, like one of the parents. but there's harmony. So if there was any kind of tension or something along those lines, this is much different type of energy. Okay, Aries, that's what I have for you. I hope that you're resonating with this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.